Aida for being mad at my sister because she showed a PowerPoint presentation with private, sexy pictures of my husband and I at our wedding reception. The thing about weddings is that no matter how much you plan, stress, and triple-check every little detail, the day always has a way of taking on a life of its own. For me, this day was supposed to be perfect, the culmination of months of planning and a celebration not just of love, but of family. I had already married the man of my dreams, my best friend since childhood, in a wild whirlwind of a Las Vegas elopement. And let's be honest, Vegas wasn't exactly the place for a classy, refined ceremony. It was chaotic, impulsive, and a little bit trashy, exactly how we wanted it at the time. But this wedding, the second one, was different. It wasn't really for us. It was for everyone else. Family weddings have a strange sort of weight to them, don't they? It's like you're not just getting married, you're also expected to perform. There's this invisible pressure to be the perfect bride, with the perfect dress, standing in front of a perfect venue, while everyone you've ever known looks on with approval. I felt that pressure from the moment my husband, let's call him Jake, and I decided to have this second wedding. It wasn't that I didn't want to celebrate our marriage again. Quite the opposite. The idea of standing in front of my family and friends, declaring my love for Jake, was something I genuinely looked forward to. But after our Vegas wedding, which was filled with laughter, late nights, and some rather inappropriate moments, I wanted this event to be a bit more, well, proper. Did you ever have that one family moment that you thought would be perfect, but then things took a wild turn? Trust me, you're not alone. My sister's surprise wedding slideshow had me cringing in front of my entire family, and let's just say it included some very inappropriate Vegas pics. Want to hear the full, hilariously awkward story? And what would you do if this happened at your wedding? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more crazy stories and updates. You won't want to miss what happens next. You know the kind of wedding I mean. The sort of wedding that makes your grandmother beam with pride, where the family photographs are tasteful and will sit on someone's mantle for decades. I wanted to give my family that memory. After all, the Vegas wedding was for us, and it was exactly what we wanted, a mad dash of spontaneous joy. But this time, it was for them. I wanted my mother to look back on this day and see her daughter, radiant in white, not downing tequila shots next to a stripper pole. I wanted Jake's conservative grandparents to have that image of us that didn't involve the helicopter, if you know what I mean. And so the planning began. Dresses were chosen, the venue was booked, flowers were ordered, and invitations were sent. My sister, Claire, who had been my best friend for as long as I could remember, was my maid of honor, and I gave her one job, one single, simple task. I asked her to put together a photo slideshow for the reception. In my mind, it would be a beautiful, nostalgic montage of pictures of me and Jake from childhood to adulthood. Claire had access to our family photo albums, videos, and plenty of inside jokes, so I knew she'd create something special. What I didn't know was that Claire's idea of special was vastly different from mine. When the day of the wedding finally arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. I could barely eat breakfast because my stomach was in knots. Not because I was nervous about marrying Jake. We had been through that before. No, it was the pressure of the day itself, the weight of making sure everything went according to plan. The hair, the dress, the flowers, the music, all of it had to be just right. After all, this was the wedding that our parents had dreamed of for us. The ceremony went off without a hitch. My heart swelled when I saw Jake standing at the altar, looking dashing in his suit. The vows we exchanged felt just as powerful the second time around, maybe even more so, because this time it wasn't just for us, it was for our family. As we kissed to seal the ceremony, I could feel the tears pricking my eyes. It was a beautiful moment, the kind of moment that makes you believe in fairy tales. The reception started, and the mood was perfect. Everyone was smiling, laughing, and enjoying themselves. There was a warmth in the air, a feeling of unity that only comes when family gathers together. We had our first dance, which was magical, and my sister gave a beautiful toast that brought me to the brink of tears. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the day I've always wanted. But then came the slideshow. When Claire stood up to introduce the slideshow, I was all smiles. I knew she had put a lot of effort into it, and I was genuinely excited to see what she had come up with. The lights dimmed, and the projector screen flickered to life. My heart swelled with emotion as the first few images appeared. Pictures of me and Jake as kids, our friendship blossoming over the years, our awkward teenage phases, and the slow realization that we were more than just friends. And then, Claire's voice rang out. For those of you who don't know, this is actually my sister and Jake's second wedding. But don't worry, I'm here to show you how the first one went down. A cold wave of panic washed over me. My stomach twisted into knots. What did she mean by that? Surely she wasn't going to show those pictures. The pictures from our Vegas elopement. The ones that were meant to stay private. But my worst fears were confirmed as the next image flashed onto the screen. A picture of Jake and me at a strip club, me mock glaring at him as he ogled a stripper's chest. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. My conservative grandparents, sitting just a few feet away, stared in stunned disbelief. Jake's grandmother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The next photo appeared. This time, it was of Jake and me in our hotel room, eating Domino's in nothing but our underwear. My face flushed red, and I wanted to crawl under the table. I glanced at my mom, who had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide in shock, and the hits just kept coming. The cowboy-cowgirl photoshoot near the Grand Canyon, an inside joke that no one in the audience would understand, flashed across the screen. Then the bikini photo, where I was practically naked at the pool, and Jake was doing the Will Smith meme, pointing at me as if to say, "Look at this!" My face was practically buried in my hands by now. The embarrassment was suffocating. I could hear the whispers starting to ripple through the room, like a low hum of confusion mixed with stifled laughter. Some people were giggling, probably our friends who knew us well enough to find the humor in it. But I could feel the eyes of my more conservative family members burning holes into the back of my head. My grandma shifted uncomfortably, her face frozen in a look of polite confusion, trying to maintain her composure while clearly not understanding why on earth she was being subjected to these images. I shot a glance at Jake, whose face was a mix of amusement and horror. He wasn't nearly as mortified as I was, but I could tell he was trying to gauge whether this was funny or a full-blown disaster. He gave me a weak smile, as if to say, "We'll get through this, babe." But I wasn't so sure. The pictures kept coming. The one of us in costumes as Cyclops and Emma Frost at a Halloween party was next, which of course made it look like I was prancing around in lingerie, while Jake's very, noticeable asterisk package in his tight superhero suit was on full display. And then came the pièce de résistance, a picture of Jake naked, playing the guitar with only the guitar covering his junk, while I fake sang next to him, wearing nothing but a long t-shirt. I wanted to die. Right there, in the middle of my wedding reception, I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. My sister, standing at the side of the room, looked completely unfazed, beaming proudly as if she had just created the most heartwarming tribute to our love story. I couldn't believe it. Did she really not see how inappropriate this was? Did she not think about the fact that our grandparents were in the room, that half the people here barely knew us? And then, just as I was about to burst from sheer embarrassment, the slideshow shifted. The inappropriate pictures faded away, and the screen was filled with more wholesome images. Pictures of Jake and me as kids, playing together in the park. Photos of us as awkward teenagers, going to school dances. And then, a home video that I hadn't seen in years. One of Jake and me at around 8 years old, holding hands and declaring to our parents that we were going to marry each other when we grew up. The room collectively let out a soft, "Oh," and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. It was beautiful. It was perfect. If only the slideshow had started and ended with that. When the lights came back on, I forced a smile and clapped along with everyone else. But inside, I was fuming. I shot a look at my sister, who was still grinning like she had just pulled off the best prank in the world. I excused myself from the table and made my way over to her, pulling her aside into a quiet corner of the venue. "What the hell, Claire?" I whispered harshly, trying to keep my voice down so that no one else would hear. "What were you thinking?" She blinked at me, clearly taken aback by my reaction. "What do you mean? It was funny. Everyone was laughing." "Everyone was laughing because they were uncomfortable," I snapped. "Did you see Grandma's face? Or Jake's grandparents? God, even Mom looked horrified." Claire crossed her arms defensively. "Well, sorry for trying to add a little fun to your boring wedding. I thought you'd appreciate it. Fun? I repeated, incredulous. You showed pictures of me half naked. You showed a picture of Jake's junk, for God's sake. How is that fun for anyone? She rolled her eyes. You're overreacting. It's not like I showed anything asterisk that asterisk bad. It was just a joke. I could feel my blood boiling. Those pictures were private, Claire. I shared them with you in confidence. They were never meant to be shown to the whole damn family. For a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her expression softened. I didn't think you'd be this upset. I thought you'd find it funny, like the rest of us. I wasn't trying to embarrass you, I swear. I sighed, my anger deflating slightly. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she had just made an innocent mistake, that she hadn't intended to humiliate me in front of my entire family. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that she should have known better. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I get that you thought it was all in good fun, but you crossed a line. You should have asked me before showing those pictures. She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension start to ease. Just don't do anything like that again, okay? Claire gave me a small, apologetic smile. I won't, I promise. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment before she added, but you have to admit, that guitar picture was pretty hilarious. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Yeah, it was. But never again, okay? She grinned. Deal. The rest of the night went off without a hitch, but I couldn't shake the lingering embarrassment from the slideshow. Every time I made eye contact with someone, I wondered if they were thinking about those pictures, if they were silently judging me for my less than appropriate Vegas escapades. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mom. It was short, but it made my stomach drop. Asterisk, we need to talk about the slideshow. I called her, dreading the conversation. Sure enough, she was livid. What were you thinking? She asked, her voice sharp with disapproval. Why would you take those kinds of pictures in the first place? I groaned, rubbing my temples. Mom, it was Vegas. It was supposed to be fun. I didn't know Claire was going to show them to everyone. Well, you should have been more careful, she snapped. Your grandmother was mortified. She couldn't stop talking about it all night. I sighed. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't want that to happen. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her tone softer this time. I just don't understand why you'd let your sister do something like that. I didn't let her do it, I protested. She didn't tell me what was in the slideshow. Well, you need to make this right, Mom said firmly. Talk to your sister. She owes us all an apology. I bit my lip, feeling torn. On the one hand, I agreed that Claire had crossed a line. But on the other hand, I didn't want to blow this out of proportion and cause more drama. I'd already confronted her, and she'd apologized. What more could I do? I'll talk to her, I said finally, hoping that would appease Mom. But things weren't so simple. A few days later, I got a call from my sister's partner, Rose. She sounded nervous, like she didn't want to be the one delivering bad news. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that Claire's really upset, she said hesitantly. She feels like everyone's mad at her for the slideshow, and now she doesn't want to talk to anyone. I groaned inwardly. Of course, Claire had a habit of playing the victim when things didn't go her way. I'm not mad at her, I said, trying to sound patient. I just wish she'd thought more about what she was doing. Well, she didn't mean to upset anyone, Rose said defensively. She thought it would be funny. And honestly, most people did think it was funny. Yeah, well, Grandma didn't think it was funny, I muttered. There was an awkward pause before Rose said, Look, I get it. But maybe just talk to her again? She's really beating herself up over this. I sighed. Fine, I'll talk to her. I did talk to Claire again, and she apologized once more, but it didn't feel like enough. There was still a part of me that was angry that she hadn't considered the consequences, angry that she had put me in such an awkward position in front of my family. But I knew I couldn't stay mad at her forever. She was my sister, and despite everything, I loved her. A few weeks after the wedding, Jake and I went on our honeymoon, a blissful escape from the drama that had unfolded. We spent 2 weeks in the Maldives, soaking up the sun, swimming in crystal-clear waters, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed to clear my head and put the whole slideshow fiasco behind me. By the time we got back, things had mostly blown over. My family had stopped talking about the slideshow, and Claire and I were on speaking terms again. We never fully addressed the issue after that second conversation, but we both knew where we stood. Looking back on it now, I can laugh about the whole thing. Yes, it was embarrassing. Yes, it was inappropriate. But in the grand scheme of things, it was just one awkward moment in what was otherwise a beautiful, unforgettable day. My relationship with Jake, my family, and even my sister hadn't been permanently damaged. In fact, in some strange way, the slideshow incident became a sort of family lore, one of those stories that would be brought up at Thanksgiving dinners for years to come, with everyone laughing about that time Claire nearly derailed the wedding. It didn't take long before the shock of it wore off, and we all found the humor in it. Even my grandmother, who had initially been horrified, started to find some amusement in the situation. A few months after the wedding, during a family gathering, she jokingly brought up the Cyclops costume picture and made a cheeky comment about how the men in our family are quite well endowed. I nearly choked on my wine, but everyone else burst into laughter, including Jake, who by now had fully embraced the absurdity of it all. Jake's grandparents, on the other hand, had a more traditional reaction to the whole thing. They never directly commented on the slideshow after the wedding, but I noticed that they began treating me with a new level of cautious politeness whenever we met. It was like they'd seen me in a completely different light, and not in a way that made them more comfortable. Still, they were too kind to ever say anything outright, so we carried on as though nothing had happened. Claire and I never talked much about the slideshow again. After our second conversation, where I made it clear how upset I was, she seemed to withdraw a bit from me. I could tell that she felt bad, but I also knew my sister well enough to know that she wasn't going to apologize again. In her mind, she had already said sorry, and dragging it out wouldn't make things better. But Claire had her own way of making things right. A few months after the wedding, she invited Jake and me over to her house for dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect, especially given the slight tension that had existed between us since the slideshow. But when we arrived, it was clear that she had gone all out to make the evening special. She'd prepared a fancy meal, steak, mashed potatoes, and asparagus, and had even opened a bottle of expensive wine that she had been saving for a special occasion. Over dinner, she didn't bring up the wedding or the slideshow, and neither did I. Instead, we talked about everything else: work, life, our plans for the future. It was the first time in months that we'd had a normal conversation, and it felt good. The awkwardness that had hung over us seemed to melt away. Toward the end of the meal, after we had finished dessert, Claire excused herself and went into the other room. When she came back, she was holding a small box. She handed it to me with a shy smile. "I've been meaning to give this to you for a while," she said, her voice softer than usual. I opened the box to find a delicate silver necklace inside. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. I knew instantly that it was Claire's way of making amends, a peace offering of sorts. "I know I messed up at the wedding," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to embarrass you. I don't know. I thought it would be funny, but I get it now. I'm sorry." I smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Claire. It means a lot." We didn't need to say much more after that. The necklace said everything that needed to be said. We were sisters, and no matter what, we would always have each other's backs, even when we crossed lines we didn't mean to. The weeks after the wedding were mostly filled with laughter and reminiscing, with friends and family constantly bringing up the slideshow in jest. But while some found it hilarious, others didn't, and the reactions were telling of deeper family dynamics. My mother, for instance, was still not entirely over it. Whenever the subject came up, she would sigh heavily and give me that look. You know the one. The "you should have known better" look that only mothers can perfect. It was clear that she felt embarrassed by association, as though my choices reflected poorly on her. "Honestly, dear," she would say, "why did you take those kinds of pictures in the first place? It's not that I mind, but you know how the family is. It's like you gave them all the ammunition they needed." At first, her remarks stung. I hated feeling like I had to justify my own choices, especially something as personal as the pictures from my Vegas wedding. But over time, I came to understand that my mother's discomfort wasn't really about the pictures themselves. It was about her own fear of judgment. She came from a generation that placed enormous value on appearances, on keeping up the perfect family image, and I had unintentionally shattered that image with one poorly curated slideshow. Jake's parents, on the other hand, were far more laid back about the whole thing. His father, a jolly man with a penchant for inappropriate jokes, found the entire thing hysterical. At one family barbecue, he made a toast to the best slideshow in wedding history, and everyone roared with laughter. Even his mother, who I had expected to be horrified, told me in private that she thought it was all in good fun. The real surprise, though, came from Jake's elderly aunt, an 80-year-old woman who had always been the epitome of prim and proper. One afternoon, when we were visiting Jake's family for dinner, she pulled me aside with a mischievous glint in her eye. "I saw that picture of Jake in his Cyclops costume," she whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. "And I have to say, you've picked quite the man. Congratulations." I blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. It was the last thing I had expected her to say, but it was also exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. It reminded me that people are far more complicated than we give them credit for. Even the most proper of individuals can have a cheeky side. Jake and I had planned our honeymoon months in advance, knowing that after the wedding, we would need a break. We chose to spend 2 weeks in the Maldives, a tropical paradise far removed from the drama of our lives. It was the perfect escape. From the moment we arrived, everything felt like a dream. The white, sandy beaches, the turquoise waters, the overwater bungalow we stayed in. It was the epitome of luxury. For the first few days, we did nothing but lounge in hammocks, sipping cocktails and watching the waves lap against the shore. It was during one of these lazy afternoons that Jake brought up the slideshow again. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "in a weird way, I'm kind of glad it happened." I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? Why's that?" He shrugged, smiling softly. "I don't know. It was embarrassing, sure, but it was also kind of us. Messy, chaotic, a little inappropriate, but real." I thought about it for a moment and realized he was right. The slideshow, as cringeworthy as it had been, was a reflection of our relationship. We weren't the perfect couple with the perfect love story. We were two people who had been friends since childhood, who had been through awkward phases and wild adventures together, and who had made the choice to be together despite everything. The Vegas wedding, the inappropriate pictures, the laughter, and the love. That was us. And in a way, the slideshow had captured that. "Yeah," I said, smiling back at him. "I guess you're right." The rest of the honeymoon was blissful. We snorkeled with manta rays, explored hidden lagoons, and indulged in romantic dinners under the stars. It was everything we had hoped for, and more. But as the days passed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure settling over me. The slideshow incident, which had once seemed like such a big deal, began to fade into the background. It became just another story in the long, winding tale of our lives together. When we returned from our honeymoon, life quickly resumed its normal pace. Jake went back to work, I started on a new project at my job, and the buzz of the wedding faded into the distance. But something had changed in me. The slideshow incident, as trivial as it may have seemed to some, had forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself, my family, and my relationships. I realized that I had spent so much of my life trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect bride, the perfect wife. But the truth was, perfection didn't exist. My relationship with Jake wasn't perfect, my family wasn't perfect, and I certainly wasn't perfect. But that was okay. In fact, it was better than okay. It was real. The slideshow, with all its awkwardness and inappropriate pictures, had reminded me that life is messy. Relationships are messy, and that's what makes them beautiful. As for my sister Claire, our relationship had been tested by the slideshow, but it had come out stronger on the other side. We had always been close, but after the wedding, there was a new level of understanding between us. She knew that she had crossed a line, and I knew that she hadn't meant to hurt me. We both learned something valuable from the experience, and in the end, it brought us closer. A few months after the wedding, Claire and her partner Rose came over for dinner. We sat around the table, laughing and reminiscing, and for the first time since the wedding, the slideshow came up in conversation. "I still can't believe you showed those pictures," I said, shaking my head with a grin. Claire laughed, a little sheepishly. "Yeah, in hindsight, not my best decision, but at least it made for a memorable wedding, right?" I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, I guess it did." As we sat there, surrounded by family and laughter, I realized that the slideshow, embarrassing as it had been, was just a small blip in the grand scheme of things. It was a funny, awkward, cringeworthy moment in what had otherwise been a beautiful day. And more importantly, it was a reminder that no matter how much we plan and prepare, life has a way of throwing us curveballs. But those curveballs, the moments that don't go according to plan, are often the ones that teach us the most. They're the moments that test our patience, our relationships, and our sense of humor. And in the end, they're the moments we remember. As I looked around the table that night, at Jake, Claire, Rose, and the life we were building together, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the laughter, for the love, for the messy, imperfect beauty of it all. And as for the slideshow, well, it may not have been the wedding presentation I had imagined, but it was ours. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.